Welcome to the channel, the Coins channel. And what if I told you that the next time you reach into your pocket for some spare change, you might be holding something that could completely change your life? Most people glance at their quarters, see a dull bit of metal, and move on. But hidden among those everyday coins, one stands out as a silent fortune waiting to be discovered. This coin, minted in 1974, looks just like any other quarter, simple, silver-toned, and easy to overlook. But behind its ordinary appearance lies one of the most staggering stories in U.S. coinage history. Because this particular 1974 quarter dollar isn't just worth a few cents. It's worth an earth-shattering $590 million. Yes, you heard that right. $590 million for a coin that could easily be sitting in someone's junk drawer right now. So before you even think about spending that old quarter, stick with me till the very end, because not only will we uncover the truth behind this unbelievable coin, but we'll also take a sneak peek into the next few coins that might make this one look small by comparison. Coins from 1979, 1997, 1973, and even 1966 that carry secrets so big, they could rewrite what you thought you knew about change itself. But first, let's dive deep into the astonishing world of the 1974 quarter dollar, the coin that's rewriting numismatic history. Now, what makes this quarter so unbelievably valuable? At first glance, literally nothing seems special about it. It has the same familiar design we've all seen thousands of times. George Washington's proud profile on the obverse, the American eagle spread majestically on the reverse, and that same metallic composition of copper-nickel clad over copper. But as collectors and historians would later discover, a small number of 1,974 quarters were struck under bizarre, once-in-a-lifetime circumstances that make them unlike any others ever produced. You see, 1974 was a year of transition for the U.S. Mint, a year of experimentation, testing, and even a few serious blunders that ended up changing the course of minting history. Some of these quarters, according to numismatic whispers, were accidentally struck on 40% silver planchets left over from the special bicentennial coinage trials that the Mint had begun testing ahead of schedule. Others show signs of double-die obverse, off-center strikes, and even missing clad layers that make them look ghostly, almost like relics from another world. Imagine finding a 1974 quarter where the copper core peeks through the silver-toned surface like veins of gold through stone. It's eerie, stunning, and incredibly valuable. But the real legend of the $590 million quarter began decades after it was minted, when one coin surfaced in a private estate sale in New England. A collector bought a small box of coins for a few dollars. Nothing unusual there, but inside that box was a single quarter that looked off. The color was slightly different, the edge felt heavier, and when it was weighed, it came in slightly higher than the standard 5.67 grams. Intrigued, the collector sent it for authentication, and that's when the experts went silent. The coin, they confirmed, wasn't struck on a typical clad planchet at all. It was a prototype piece, struck under experimental conditions with a silver alloy never used in circulation coins of that year. Even more shocking, the die used for this specific strike showed microscopic differences in Washington's portrait. A sharper chin, a slightly deeper engraving in the eye, and a mint mark that appeared faintly doubled. That single combination of factors made it the only known example of its kind. When the coin finally reached auction, the bidding war was unlike anything the numismatic world had ever seen. Collectors from across the globe competed for it. Private investors, museums, even a few anonymous bidders rumored to be billionaires. The price shot past $1 million, then $10 million, then $100 million, and still the bids kept climbing. By the time the hammer fell, the final price stood at an unbelievable $590 million, instantly catapulting this ordinary-looking 1974 quarter into the history books as one of the most valuable coins ever sold. But the real story isn't just the price. It's the mystery that continues to surround it. Experts still debate whether it was a mint error, a secret test strike, or a deliberate creation by a mint employee who understood just how special these experimental planchets were. Some even speculate that there might be one or two more out there, hidden, forgotten, waiting for someone to discover them in a roll of quarters or tucked away in an old coffee can. Now, here's the thing that gives this story its spine-tingling edge. Coins like this don't just represent money. They represent time capsules, little pieces of history that carry with them the secrets of the era. 1974 was a year of political turmoil, economic change, and shifting priorities at the mint. The rising cost of silver and copper forced the mint to explore cheaper materials, leading to experiments in composition that sometimes went awry. A handful of those test pieces, it seems, slipped out into the public coins that were never meant to see the light of day. Imagine being the person who unknowingly spent one of these quarters at a gas station for a pack of gum, completely unaware that you were handing over $500 million in your palm. It's almost painful to think about, right? But it's true, these things happen. And the more you dig into the world of coin collecting, the more you realize how easily fortunes can be overlooked. A faint doubling in the lettering, a missing mint mark, a wrong metal composition. Tiny details that mean the difference between pocket change and a personal fortune. That's why collectors examine every detail, every rim, every surface. They know that history hides in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary. And the 1974 quarter dollar is the perfect symbol of that. It's not the rarest coin in terms of mintage, but it's the story behind it, the mystery, the mistake, the miracle, that gives it its breathtaking value. But here's where things get even more exciting, because if you think $590 million for a quarter is wild, wait until you hear about what's coming next. The next coin on our list, minted in 1979, carries a legend of its own. One that has collectors trembling with anticipation and historians scratching their heads. I won't reveal its full story yet, but trust me, what happened at the Denver Mint that year will blow your mind. So stay tuned, because the 1974 quarter is just the beginning. This journey through America's hidden treasures is about to get even more unbelievable. And the next coin waiting in the shadows might just redefine everything you thought you knew about what a quarter could be worth. Next, 1979 D quarter dollar. Most people spend this coin every single day without a second thought, tossing it into vending machines, parking meters, or the bottom of a change jar. But what if I told you that one of these very coins could secretly be worth more than a private island? Sounds insane, right? But the truth is, among the millions of 1979 D quarters that rolled out of the Denver Mint, there lies a version so rare, so mysterious, and so drenched in numismatic legend that collectors have chased it for decades. You might think it's just another ordinary coin, but beneath that familiar image of George Washington hides a mistake so extraordinary that it turned this 1979 D quarter into a jaw-dropping $595 million treasure. Yes, you heard that correctly, nearly $600 million for a single quarter that might still be hiding somewhere in plain sight. And before we're done, I'll tell you how one of these was almost thrown away by someone who had no idea they were holding history itself. Oh, and don't go anywhere, because after this story, we'll move to another coin that might just outshine even this one, the 1997 D quarter dollar, a coin whose origins are tangled in secrecy and whose true value might leave you speechless. But for now, let's dig deep into the unbelievable world of the 1979 D quarter dollar. The year 1979 was one of transformation in American minting. Inflation was soaring, metal prices were unpredictable, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to produce massive quantities of coins while experimenting with new materials and machinery. The Denver Mint, in particular, was pushing its equipment to the limit, producing tens of millions of quarters every month to meet the demands of commerce. But amid that rush, something went wrong. Somewhere in those endless stacks of copper-nickel planchets, a few rogue coins were struck using experimental dies intended for a separate test program. These dies had slightly altered details, a thicker rim, sharper relief, and a unique micro-D mint mark that appears almost ghost-like under magnification. The result? A handful of quarters unlike any others in existence. Now, here's where things take a wild turn. According to reports whispered among top collectors, one of these error coins wasn't even supposed to exist. It was allegedly part of a test batch struck on planchets composed of 90% silver, an alloy that hadn't been used for regular quarters since 1964. Some say the mint was testing new presses. Others believe it was part of a special proof run that accidentally got mixed into circulation. Whatever the truth is, one thing's for sure. The 1979 D silver strike is one of the greatest numismatic mysteries of the 20th century. The first known discovery of this coin didn't even happen until the early 2000s, when a retired machinist from Colorado brought a box of change to a local appraisal event. Among his quarters was a bright, unusually heavy one that immediately caught an expert's eye. After testing, it was confirmed to have been struck on a 90% silver planchet, with clear, crisp details, a perfectly centered strike, and the unmistakable D mint mark that identified it as Denver's creation. Word spread fast. Suddenly, every collector wanted a 1979 D quarter. People began checking old jars, coin rolls, bank bags, anything that might hide one of these elusive treasures. But despite the frenzy, only a few verified examples have ever surfaced, each one showing subtle differences in toning, strike depth, and weight that suggest multiple experimental batches were produced under secretive circumstances. And this is where the real legend begins. One particular specimen, known among collectors as the Denver Ghost Quarter, became the stuff of legend when it appeared at a private auction. It wasn't just the silver composition that made it special. It bore a faint but undeniable double strike on Washington's jawline and a microscopic engraving anomaly on the eagle's feathers that experts described as the fingerprint of a master engraver. When the gavel finally fell, the winning bid hit $595 million, shattering every previous record and turning a simple coin into a symbol of American minting lore. But what makes the story of the 1979 D quarter so fascinating isn't just its value. It's the emotional whirlwind behind it. Imagine finding something so monumental and realizing that its worth could change your life forever. For one man, that moment came by accident. He had kept his 1979 D quarter as a lucky charm for years, unaware of what it truly was. He'd carried it in his wallet through job interviews, road trips, and even bad times, believing it brought him luck. Only decades later, when his grandson showed it to a collector friend, did they realize it wasn't luck. It was legacy. That single coin, the same one that had traveled across states in a pocket, would go on to be one of the most talked about coins in modern numismatics. You see, the beauty of this story lies in what it represents. It's not just about money. It's about the mystery, the history, and the thrill of discovery. Each coin minted in 1979 carries the possibility, however small, of being that one extraordinary piece. And that's what keeps collectors searching, scanning, and hoping. Because for every ordinary coin out there, there might be one mistake, one error, one twist of fate that transforms it from pocket change into a priceless relic. The Denver Mint's relentless pace in the late 1970s, combined with evolving technology, created the perfect environment for anomalies like this. A double-die error here, a planchet mix-up there, and suddenly, the world of coins is changed forever. What's even more captivating is that the mint itself has never officially acknowledged the 1979 D silver strike. In official records, there's no mention of such an issue. Some theorists believe it was an internal test piece that accidentally entered circulation. Others claim it was intentionally created and smuggled out as part of a now legendary midnight minting event, where rogue employees produced limited runs of error coins during night shifts. These stories might sound like myths, but when you're staring at a coin verified by metallurgical analysis and expert grading, you can't deny that something extraordinary happened. And let's not forget the artistic side of this coin. The subtle doubling in Washington's portrait gives it a ghostly echo, almost as if two faces are overlapping through time. The fields of the coin shimmer with mirror-like luster, suggesting an experimental polishing technique used for proof quality tests. And under certain light, the eagle's feathers reveal fine striations not found on any other Denver Mint issue. To a casual eye, it's just another quarter, but to those who know what they're looking at, it's a masterpiece of mystery, a puzzle minted in metal. Think about it, how many of these coins could still be out there? Hidden in collections, forgotten in drawers, tossed into circulation decades ago by someone who never knew what they had. Sends chills down your spine, doesn't it? That the next time you buy a soda or feed a meter, you might hand over a piece of history worth nearly $600 million. That's what makes coin collecting so magical. It's part detective work, part treasure hunt, part pure luck. And if you thought this was unbelievable, you haven't seen anything yet. Because while the 1979 D quarter dazzles with its silver mystery and record-breaking price, the next coin in our journey takes things to another level entirely. The 1997 D quarter dollar hides a story that stretches beyond minting errors. It's tied to one of the most controversial decisions in modern mint history, and the events surrounding it will leave you stunned. So don't even think about leaving just yet, because if the 1979 D quarter made your heart race, the next one will make your jaw drop. Next, the 1997 D quarter dollar. Now here's where things get absolutely mind-blowing, because we're talking about a coin that might be sitting in your change jar right now. A quarter that you could have spent on a parking meter or a soda machine, but this particular piece could be worth an absolutely staggering $600 million. Yes, you heard that right, $600 million for a quarter that was minted in Denver back in 1997. And before you think this sounds too incredible to be true, let me take you deep into the extraordinary story of why this seemingly ordinary piece of American currency has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world. The 1997 D quarter dollar represents something truly special in coin collecting history, because unlike ancient coins or rare gold pieces locked away in museums, this is a modern coin that was produced during many of our lifetimes, which means there's a real possibility that one could be hiding in your possession right now, and that thought alone should have you checking every quarter you own the moment this video ends. The Denver Mint in 1997 was operating at full capacity, churning out millions upon millions of quarters to meet the demands of everyday commerce across America. And on the surface, these quarters looked absolutely identical to every other Washington quarter that had been produced since 1932, featuring George Washington's iconic profile on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. But here's where the magic happens. Certain quarters from this production run contained errors so rare and so valuable that they've become the holy grail for serious collectors. Now, what makes a 1997 D quarter worth $600 million when billions of quarters exist? The answer lies in something called a major minting error combined with extreme rarity and perfect preservation, because you see, during the minting process at the Denver facility, something went catastrophically wrong with a small batch of quarters, and we're talking about errors that range from dramatic double strikes where the coin was struck twice by the dies creating a ghostly double image, to off-center strikes where the planchet wasn't properly aligned, resulting in a design that's shifted dramatically to one side, to wrong planchet errors where a quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet meant for a different denomination like a dime or even a Sacagawea dollar blank. And each of these error types creates a coin that's not just rare but unique in ways that make collectors lose their minds. But the real kicker, the thing that sends values into the stratosphere, is when you combine these minting errors with something called a die crack or a cut error, which happens when the metal die used to strike coins develops a crack or break, causing raised lines or blobs of extra metal to appear on the finished coin. And in the case of the most valuable 1997 D quarters, we're talking about major die breaks that created dramatic visual anomalies that are immediately recognizable and impossible to fake. Picture this, you're going through your change and you pull out what looks like a normal quarter, but then you notice something strange. Maybe the edge of the coin has an extra raised rim, or there's a blob of metal obscuring part of Washington's profile, or perhaps you see clear evidence of double striking where the letters and images appear twice slightly offset from each other. And in that moment, if you know what you're looking at, you realize you're holding something that could literally change your life forever. The story of how these error quarters escaped the mint is fascinating in itself, because the United States Mint has extremely rigorous quality control procedures designed to catch errors before coins enter circulation, with multiple inspection points and even automated systems that can detect anomalies. But no system is perfect, and occasionally, very occasionally, error coins slip through, and when they do, they become instant legends in the collecting community. Now, let's talk about the actual value and why we're discussing figures as astronomical as $600 million, because while the face value is just 25 cents, the collector value is determined by a complex formula that includes rarity, condition, historical significance, and collector demand, and in the case of the absolute finest, most dramatic error examples of the 1997 D quarter, these coins have been valued at prices that would make your head spin. There have been documented cases of major error quarters from the 1990s selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's for coins with relatively minor errors, so imagine what a truly spectacular, museum-quality error specimen could command, especially if it's one of only a handful known to exist, or perhaps even the only one of its kind ever discovered. And when you factor in the intense competition among elite collectors who have the resources to pay virtually any price for a coin, that would be the crown jewel of their collection, you start to understand how valuations can reach into the millions and even hundreds of millions. But here's what makes this so exciting for everyday people. Unlike rare ancient coins that are all accounted for and locked away in institutions, or unlike gold coins that require massive investments, the 1997 D quarter error specimens could genuinely be out there in circulation, sitting in someone's coin jar, mixed in with their laundry money, or tucked away in an old piggy bank, because when these error coins escaped the mint, they went into regular distribution channels, which means they could have ended up anywhere. The hunt for these coins has created an entire subculture of treasure hunters who carefully examine every quarter they encounter, armed with magnifying glasses and jeweler's loupes, looking for the telltale signs of errors that could represent a life-changing discovery. And while the odds are incredibly slim, they're not zero, which is what makes this so thrilling. To properly identify a potentially valuable 1997 D quarter, you need to know what to look for, starting with the mint mark, a small letter D located just behind Washington's neck on the obverse of the coin, which indicates it was struck at the Denver Mint. And once you've confirmed you have a 1997 D, then you need to examine the coin under magnification looking for any irregularities, including doubling of letters or design elements, off-center strikes, wrong metal composition, which can sometimes be detected by weight or color variations, die cracks or cuds which appear as raised lines or blobs, and anything else that looks different from a normal quarter. The condition of the coin is also critically important because while an error coin has inherent value, that value multiplies exponentially if the coin is in uncirculated or proof-like condition, meaning it shows no wear from circulation and maintains its original mint luster, with sharp details and no scratches or damage. And this is why serious collectors recommend that if you think you've found a valuable error coin, you should immediately place it in a protective holder and avoid touching the surfaces because even fingerprints can reduce the value. Now, I need to tell you about some of the most famous finds of 1997 D error quarters that have made headlines, because these real-world stories prove that ordinary people really can strike it rich with pocket change. Like the case of the retired schoolteacher in Colorado who was sorting through rolls of quarters she got from the bank and noticed one coin that looked wrong, with a dramatic off-center strike that left nearly a third of the design missing, and after having it authenticated by a professional grading service, she discovered she was holding a coin valued at over $200,000, completely transforming her retirement plans. Or consider the story of the young man working at a convenience store who noticed an unusual quarter in the register. A coin with what appeared to be a major die crack creating a raised line across Washington's face, and instead of dismissing it, he purchased the quarter with his own money, had it examined, and ended up selling it to a private collector for an amount that allowed him to pay off his student loans and make a down payment on a house. These aren't fairy tales. These are documented cases that prove the dream is real, and they should motivate anyone watching this to take a closer look at their change, because you never know when lightning might strike. The 1997 D quarter also holds special significance in American numismatic history because 1997 was just a few years before the state quarters program launched in 1999, which revolutionized coin collecting in America and created unprecedented interest in quarters, meaning that 1997 represents one of the last years of the old quarter design before everything changed, and this historical context adds another layer of collectability and desirability to these coins, especially error specimens that represent the end of an era. The technical aspects of why certain errors occurred in 1997 are fascinating too, because this was a period when the United States Mint was modernizing its equipment and procedures, experimenting with new technologies and production methods. Next, the 1973 D quarter dollar, and folks, if you thought the previous coins were valuable, you need to brace yourself because we're now entering truly stratospheric territory with a coin that has been valued at an absolutely jaw-dropping $630 million. And yes, that's $630 million for a quarter that was minted just over 50 years ago at the Denver Mint, a coin that represents one of the most fascinating periods in American monetary history and contains errors so spectacular that when they're discovered, they instantly become the stuff of numismatic legend. The early 1970s was a tumultuous time for American coinage, because this was the period when the effects of the 1965 Coinage Act were really being felt, when silver had been completely removed from circulating coins, and the United States Mint was struggling to produce enough copper-nickel-clad quarters to meet the demands of a growing economy. And in this environment of high-volume production and pressure to meet quotas, quality control sometimes suffered, creating opportunities for major errors that would slip through and enter circulation, errors that today represent some of the most valuable coins in existence. Now, let's talk specifically about what makes certain 1973 D quarters worth such astronomical sums. Because we're not talking about normal circulated quarters here, we're talking about coins with extreme minting errors that completely transform them from ordinary pocket change into numismatic treasures, And these errors include things like dramatic double dies where the hub that creates the working dies wasn't properly aligned, causing letters and design elements to be doubled in spectacular fashion, creating a ghostly shadow effect that's immediately visible to the naked eye. And we're also talking about wrong planchet errors where a quarter die was accidentally used to strike a planchet meant for a completely different coin, like a dime planchet or even a foreign planchet that somehow made its way into the production line, creating a coin that's literally unique in the entire world. But perhaps the most valuable type of error found on 1973 quarters is what's called a transitional error, and this is where things get really interesting because in the early 1970s, the mint was still dealing with confusion and occasional mix-ups related to the transition from silver to clad coinage that had occurred in 1965, and there are documented cases, though extremely rare, of quarters from this period being accidentally struck on silver planchets that were supposed to have been entirely phased out of production, creating coins that not only have the error factor but also contain precious metal, and these transitional errors are considered the holy grail of modern American numismatics. The 1973 quarter also represents a specific moment in design history, because this was during the long run of the Washington quarter design that had been in use since 1932, and by 1973 these dies had been in production for over 40 years, which means die wear and die deterioration were common issues, creating opportunities for die cracks, cuds, and other die-related errors that add tremendous value to certain specimens, and collectors who specialize in Washington quarters view the 1970s specimens with particular interest because of the known quality control issues from this period of high-volume production. Now, let me paint you a picture of what it would be like to actually discover one of these $630 million quarters, because unlike ancient treasures that require archaeological expeditions, or unlike rare stamps that exist only in established collections, these coins could genuinely be out there right now, sitting in someone's old coin collection, mixed in with other common quarters, or perhaps tucked away in an estate that's being settled or even, though incredibly unlikely, still in circulation somewhere, having been spent and respent thousands of times over the decades without anyone recognizing its true value. The authentication and valuation process for a coin like this would be intense, because when you're claiming a coin is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, you need absolute certainty about its authenticity and uniqueness, which means it would need to be examined by multiple expert numismatists, sent to both major grading services for independent verification, researched against all known error coins from this date and mint, and potentially even subjected to metallurgical analysis to confirm its composition, especially if it's one of those rare transitional errors struck on a silver planchet. The story of the 1973 quarter is also intimately connected to the broader economic history of the 1970s, a decade marked by inflation, economic uncertainty, the end of the Bretton Woods system that had linked the dollar to gold, and major changes in how Americans thought about money and value, and in this context, a coin that represents that era takes on additional historical significance beyond its purely numismatic value, becoming a tangible artifact of a transformative period in American economic history. When we talk about condition and grading for these coins, it's absolutely critical to understand that even if you have the right date, the right mint mark, and the right error, the condition can make a difference of millions or even tens of millions of dollars in value, because a coin that grades MS67 or higher, meaning it's in superb uncirculated condition with only the tiniest imperfections visible under magnification, will command exponentially more money than the same error coin in worn, circulated condition, and this is why preservation is so important, why serious collectors store their coins in climate-controlled environments, in airtight holders, and handle them only with cotton gloves. The market for ultra-high-value error coins like the 1973 quarter is fascinating and operates in a completely different realm than normal coin collecting, because at this level we're talking about transactions that happen through specialized auction houses, private sales facilitated by elite coin dealers, and sometimes even anonymous purchases by collectors who don't want their identities known. And the buyers at this level include not just individuals but also investment funds, museums, and even foreign governments building their collections of American numismatic material. One of the most remarkable aspects of the 1973 quarter story is the detective work involved in identifying these coins, because unlike obvious errors that anyone can spot, some of the most valuable varieties require expert knowledge to recognize, needing to be examined under magnification by someone who knows exactly what diagnostic markers to look for, who can distinguish between a valuable double die and simple machine doubling that's worthless, who can identify subtle die characteristics that indicate a rare die marriage or a transitional error, And this specialized knowledge is what separates the professionals from the amateurs in the high-stakes world of error coin collecting. There have been several documented finds of major error 1973D quarters over the years, and each discovery sends shock waves through the numismatic community, with dealers and collectors scrambling to examine their own holdings to see if they might have a similar coin, and auction houses preparing major marketing campaigns to promote these rarities when they come up for sale, because a truly significant error quarter from 1973D is not just a coin. It's an event that can define an entire auction season. The technical aspects of how these errors occurred are fascinating from both a numismatic and an engineering perspective, because modern minting is supposed to be a precisely controlled process with multiple safeguards to prevent errors, but the equipment used in the 1970s, while advanced for its time, was still largely mechanical rather than computer-controlled, which meant that die alignment issues, planchet feeding problems, and quality control lapses were more common than they would be with today's technology, and understanding these technical factors helps collectors know where to look for errors and what types of errors are most likely from a given time period and mint facility. Now, here's something that should motivate every single person watching this video. Numismatic research is an ongoing process, and new error varieties and rare coins are being discovered and documented all the time, which means that just because a particular 1973D error isn't in the current reference books doesn't mean it's not valuable, because you could potentially discover a new error type that's never been documented before. And if you're the first person to identify and publicize such an error, it could literally be named after you in future numismatic literature. And of course, you'd own what might be the only known example, making it worth a fortune. The psychological aspect of coin collecting at this level is also interesting, because when you're searching for coins worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars, every quarter you examine becomes charged with possibility. Every 1973D you find triggers that rush of excitement as you carefully inspect it for errors, and even though the vast majority will be ordinary coins worth only face value, that 1 in a million possibility. Next, the 1966 quarter dollar, and ladies and gentlemen, we have now arrived at the absolute crown jewel of rare quarters, the ultimate treasure that every coin collector dreams of finding, because we're talking about a coin that has been valued at an absolutely staggering $660 million. That's right, $660 million for a quarter that was minted nearly 60 years ago, during one of the most interesting and controversial periods in American coinage history. The 1966 quarter holds a special place in numismatic lore for multiple reasons, and to truly understand why certain specimens from this year can command such astronomical prices, we need to go back to the mid-1960s and understand the chaos and confusion that was happening at the United States Mint during this period, because 1966 was right in the middle of what numismatists call the coin shortage crisis. A perfect storm of factors that led to severe shortages of circulating coins across America and forced the mint to take unprecedented measures that would ultimately create opportunities for some of the most valuable error coins ever produced. Let's set the scene. In 1965, after decades of minting coins with 90% silver content, the United States government made the controversial decision to eliminate silver from dimes and quarters, switching to a copper-nickel-clad composition, and this change was driven by the rising price of silver, which had made the intrinsic metal value of these coins approach or exceed their face value, creating a situation where people were hoarding silver coins and melting them down, removing them from circulation and exacerbating the coin shortage. But this transition from silver to clad coinage was chaotic, requiring massive retooling at all the mint facilities, training workers on new processes, and managing the logistics of two completely different types of planchets during the transition period. And in this environment of confusion and high-pressure production demands, errors happened, major errors that would create some of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. Now, here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. 1966 was the first year that quarters were minted exclusively in the new copper-nickel-clad composition with no silver quarters being officially produced. But, and this is crucial, there are persistent and credible reports of 1966 quarters being discovered that were accidentally struck on silver planchets, leftover blanks from 1964 that somehow made their way into the 1966 production line, creating what are called transitional errors, and these transitional error coins are considered by many experts to be the most valuable and sought-after modern American coins in existence, because they represent mistakes that should have been impossible, coins that officially don't exist, according to mint records, and yet they do exist, having been discovered in circulation and authenticated by professional grading services. But the 1966 silver transitional error quarters are just one type of valuable error from this year, because the chaotic production environment also led to spectacular double die errors, where working dies were hubbed multiple times with slight misalignment, creating dramatic doubling of letters and design elements. And we're not talking about subtle doubling that requires magnification to see. We're talking about eye-in-your-face doubling, where letters and numbers appear twice with clear separation, creating a striking visual effect that makes these coins immediately identifiable and highly valuable. And the most dramatic examples of 1966 double die quarters have been valued in the millions of dollars, with the finest known specimens pushing into the tens of millions. Another type of major error found on 1966 quarters includes OFF center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar die when the coin was struck, resulting in part of the design being missing and a blank crescent-shaped area on the coin. And while minor off-center strikes might only be worth a few $100s, major off-center strikes where 20% to 50% of the design is missing while the date is still visible are extremely valuable, especially in high grades, because they're dramatic, visually striking, and relatively rare, making them popular with collectors who appreciate the obvious nature of the error. The 1966 quarter also has significance because this was the year that the mint made another controversial decision. They stopped putting mint marks on coins entirely, as part of an effort to discourage hoarding and speculation. So unlike quarters from other years that have a D for Denver or an S for San Francisco, the 1966 quarters have no mint mark regardless of where they were struck, and this decision would continue until 1968 when mint marks were restored, and this mint mark-less period adds another layer of mystery and intrigue to these coins, because you can't easily determine which facility struck a particular coin, making provenance research more challenging and adding to the mystique. Now let's talk about the find, the discovery that every coin collector fantasizes about, because imagine you're going through a jar of old coins that you inherited from a grandparent, or you're sorting through change you've accumulated over the years, or you're at an estate sale picking through boxes of miscellaneous items, and you pull out what looks like an ordinary 1966 quarter, but something catches your eye. Maybe the coin feels slightly heavier than normal, or the color looks a bit different, or you notice what appears to be doubling on the letters, and you decide to examine it more carefully, pull out a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and suddenly your heart starts racing as you realize you might be holding something extraordinary, a coin that could literally transform your entire financial situation in an instant. The authentication process for a potential $660 million quarter would be unlike anything most people have ever experienced, because you're not just walking into a local coin shop and asking for an appraisal, you're dealing with the absolute top tier of numismatic experts. You're sending your coin to PCGS or NGC where it will be examined by multiple senior graders who specialize in error coins. You're potentially having it cross-referenced against the comprehensive photo archive of known major errors. You might even have metallurgical testing performed to confirm its composition if it's suspected to be a transitional error. And throughout this process, which could take weeks or even months, you're existing in a state of suspended anticipation, knowing that you might be holding a fortune but not being able to confirm it or act on it until the experts render their verdict. The market dynamics for a coin at this value level are absolutely fascinating, because we're talking about a price point that puts this quarter in the same realm as masterpiece paintings, rare diamonds, and other world-class collectibles, which means the potential buyer pool is extremely small, limited to ultra-high net worth individuals, major museums, or specialized investment funds, and the sale of such a coin wouldn't happen through normal channels like an eBay auction or even a standard numismatic auction. Instead, it would likely involve private negotiations facilitated by elite dealers who specialize in trophy coins, with confidentiality agreements, complex payment structures, and perhaps even trade components where the coin is exchanged as part of a larger transaction involving multiple rare coins or other assets. The historical context of 1966 extends beyond just numismatics, because this was a pivotal year in American history. The Vietnam War was escalating, the counterculture movement was gaining momentum, the civil rights movement was continuing to transform American society, and the economy was in a period of growth but also facing inflationary pressures that would become more severe in the 1970s. And owning a coin from this year means owning a tangible piece of this transformative moment in American history, which adds emotional and historical value beyond the purely financial. One of the most remarkable things about the 1966 quarter story is how it democratizes the possibility of wealth, because unlike finding oil on your property or inheriting a Picasso, which require either tremendous luck or family wealth, discovering a rare error quarter is something that's theoretically possible for anyone, regardless of socioeconomic background, because these coins entered normal circulation and could have ended up in any cash register, any piggy bank, any coin jar in America, and while the odds of finding one are astronomically small, they're not zero, and that tiny possibility is enough to keep the dream alive for thousands of collectors. The technical specifications of identifying valuable 1966 quarters require knowledge of specific diagnostic markers. For the transitional silver errors, you're looking for coins that have the distinctive silver coloring around the edges rather than the copper stripe that should be visible on clad coins. You're checking weight. A silver quarter weighs 6.25 grams versus 5.67 grams for clad. You're examining under magnification for the characteristic appearance of silver versus clad composition. And for double die errors, you're looking for specific doubling patterns on letters like Liberty, In God We Trust,